This is Richard Wolff from Democracy at Work, responding to another Ask Prof. Wolff question from our Patreon community. This question comes from James, and it asks about those very high-paid actors, actresses, athletes, and so on here in the United States, some of whom earn in the millions of dollars and even up heading towards $1 billion. He asks me, are those really workers in the Marxian system? Does it make sense to call them workers when they earn so much money? This question comes up often, so I want to respond as directly as I can. Income that you earn and your position in a class structure are two different things. In the United States, the dominant ways of thinking about economics have collapsed together: class structure, the way the economy is organized on the one hand, and the way incomes are distributed on the other, as if they were the same. There's an old tradition that defines class in terms of how much wealth you have, how much income you get, and so on. That's a very old definition of class, existed for thousands of years before Karl Marx was ever born. What Marx did was add a new and different concept of class, a new and different definition. Class had to do not with how much money you earned, or even how much power you had. It had to do with your position in something that goes on in every society, namely the production and distribution of a surplus. Marx was interested in that because other people hadn't understood it. It wasn't that income isn't important. Of course it is. And it wasn't that power and how much you have or don't have isn't important. Of course it is. But those things are different. For example, Jeffrey Bezos has an enormous amount of wealth, but not all that much political power. Joseph Biden has an enormous amount of power as a president, but not all that much wealth. Now, he's richer than most of us, but far from wielding the kind of wealth that people like Elon Musk or Bezos or Bill Gates have. Which of them is in the upper class is then a question depending on how you define class. Marx's definition was this: where are you, each individual, in the system of producing and distributing surplus? And here's what he meant. In every economy, most people do the regular work. They produce chairs and software programs and hamburgers and blouses and all the rest. But those people, the workers, always produce more than they themselves consume. Where does that extra, what Marx called that surplus, where does it go? In slavery, it goes from the workers, the slaves who produce the stuff, to the masters. In fact, the masters take it all, give back some to the slaves to keep them going, and keep the rest, the surplus, for themselves. In feudalism, the serfs do the work, and the lords of the land, the landlords, keep the surplus. And in capitalism, Marx discovered, it's the employees who do most of the work, who always produce more value than they get paid in wages. That difference is the surplus, which capitalists call profit. They'd like to believe they produced it, but they didn't. The employees did. Just like the lords of feudalism and the masters in slavery like to believe they caused the surpluses that they lived so luxuriously on, but they didn't. Well, then what do we do with highly paid workers? If they're still producing surplus for somebody else, they're workers. whether they get paid a lot or medium or a little. You know, in slavery, you may not know this, but in slavery, there are many examples of slaves who owned their own slaves. In other words, you had a hierarchy. Slaves rich enough to own their own slaves were slaves with wealth, slaves with income. But they were still slaves. They still were owned by somebody else. But it was just a system that allowed an owned slave to also own slaves. And so it is possible for a worker, LeBron James, or some great movie star, who works and produces value far above what they get paid, even though they get paid a lot. And in fact, they only get paid a lot because they produce even more for their employer. So yes, workers can get higher income, but they're workers. They're in a class of employees. They're exploited because they produce more than they themselves get as a group. And that means something is going on, exploitation, that makes Marx think you could do a lot better than a society organized that way. This is Richard Wolff for Democracy at Work.